Excellent. Welcome to our first episode of our podcast,
Too Scared to Sleep.
Too Scared to Sleep. We are your hosts, Dylan Cadenhead and Jake Cantu.
I'm Dylan.
I'm Jake. And we are joined by our producer, Annabelle.
Say hi, Annabelle.
Hey.
Annabelle is the best. She is the best.
That precious little possum.
A precious little possum, yes. So the reason that we're doing a podcast is because Dylan and I and Annabelle, we all work at the same retail store, which is why we hate humanity so much. The retail store that we work at happens to be haunted, and that's an episode in and of itself. But because of that, we started to trade paranormal stories and ghost stories back and forth for a couple of months and realized that we were just so interested in it. And Dylan and I would talk about it every chance we got. And then eventually we started talking about putting together our own podcast, but it was all very conceptual. We had no idea what we were going to do. We had no equipment. And then just out of nowhere, Annabelle just came into our lives and had some equipment that we could use, had access to the equipment. Turns out that she is a producer extraordinaire. And so really just, it went from being a pipe dream to being a reality, which is where we are right now.
I know, we're here. Annabelle is really just a gift. She's just the absolute best.
She's our precious little possum.
Our precious little possum.
So easily excitable, so easily scared, which is why we call her possum. But anyway, so yeah. We really enjoy paranormal stuff. We have lots of paranormal stories from our own families, from our own childhood. We have gone to haunted places. We want to learn more about haunted places. We want to learn more about conspiracy theories, and we want to impart that knowledge to you through podcast, correct?
Absolutely. We're super into paranormal, true crime, folklore, it's all over the place.
Creepypasta, cryptids.
Absolutely.
Conspiracy theories.
And we have big hopes for what we're going to do with this podcast.
Absolutely.
Later on.
We're hoping to be haunted. We're hoping to be afraid, running out of a house afraid.
My main goal is to die and then haunt this podcast.
Oh my God.
And just let my spirit talk to everyone.
If you haunt me from the afterlife,
oh, I will.
I'm going to be so annoyed.
I will.
It's bad
for
enough.
sure haunt
it's
you.
bad enough that we talk to each other all the time.
We do.
It seems that way.
We do.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else to say. I guess we should just start in on the stories, right? All right. So you want to go first?
I suppose I will go first.
All right, excellent.
Let me tell you a tale.
Oh my God.
Let me learn you something.
Oh boy, here we go.
And I'm gonna learn you about Madame Delphine LaLaurie.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people know of her at least through American Horror Story. Coven? Yeah, it was Coven.
Right.
And she was
set in New Orleans. Yes.
Yeah, which is where she was in real life. New Orleans is super cool and super haunted. There will be much more about New Orleans later.
Of course.
But Delphine LaLaurie in American Horror Story Coven was actually super toned down. She was pretty screwed up in that show anyway, but it's so much worse.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Absolutely.
Truth is more horrible.
Oh, without a doubt. It is just atrocious. So we are in for a wild pilot episode. Let's start with a little bit of background on Delphine LaLaurie. She was actually born Delphine McCarty in 1780 in New Orleans. She was a second generation of a white Creole family that moved from Ireland into Louisiana. She has 5 children. Well, she's dead now. She had 5 children from 3 different husbands, the first 2 of which died under, quote, mysterious circumstances.
I was about to ask if she'd murdered her husbands.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. So she stayed in French New Orleans, and if you're looking for the address, I believe it's still up there. People have LaLaurie tours and stuff. It's at 1140 Royal Street. When she got it, it was a 2-story house with an expansive attic. She bought that in 1831, and...
For what, $18?
Probably. It's ridiculous. I love inflation.
And 3 beaded necklaces.
For 11 goats.
There you go.
And 12
goats.
slaves.
Oh, God.
No, she would not have given them up.
No, she's got better plans for the slaves, doesn't she?
Oh, she does. You're in for a treat.
God.
So her 3rd husband was a surgeon named Leonard LaLaurie, and he was from a wealthy French family, which is why she could afford to buy this, extravagant 2-story house. Okay, so she was really well known for throwing cocktail parties for the upper echelon of society.
So she's high society.
Yeah, just a real high class gal. And on the outside, in public, she was super nice and kind to her slaves, and everybody was like, "Wow, what a gal! She's not so bad." That Delphine LaLaurie,
Right, like all good sociopaths and psychopaths, they.
yeah, she puts on a good front.
Mm-hmm.
Now's the point when we can just jump right into the mess.
Okay.
So
what was really happening in the house?
What was really happening, and it's a doozy. So one of the more popular stories, one of the fucked up stories, was a 12-year-old slave girl that LaLaurie had, and she had quite a few different slaves, but this one was brushing LaLaurie's hair, and she pulled too hard on it, and it pulled some of her hair. She ran away because Delphine was just furious. She was so crazy that just for pulling her hair while brushing it, Delphine chased her around the house with a whip, trying to whip her to death. And the little girl ended up throwing herself off of the roof of the house to her death, just to avoid having to deal with LaLaurie anymore. If that gives you any indication of what a top-notch gal she was.
I would rather throw myself off the roof to my death than suffer the punishment.
Yeah.
For pulling her hair with a brush.
Exactly. It's not like she killed her dog. She just...
How dare you?
I'm so sorry.
So
Also,
sad.
I forgot to mention, we have a special guest here with us. It's our producer Annabelle's little dog. His name is Pappas, and we love him. A little baby.
Stop with
Pappas, come here. I love him. I love him so much. He loves me too. Look at that. He's all cuddled up with me now.
He loves me more.
No, is he cuddled up with you right now?
No.
I don't think so. Sweet baby.
He could be.
No, he loves me more. Yes, you do. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting super off track. Okie dokie. So, obviously, it's kind of hard to hide the death of a 12-year-old girl who's now splattered all over your street. So, when people noticed that, they started being like, oh, that's real weird, that's real spooky, maybe LaLaurie isn't as good as we thought she was. So, pretty much all the public that knew her started to...
Turn against her?
Yeah, turn against her. And then come to find out that cook, it was another one of her slaves that she kept in the house, she kept the cook chained to the oven so that she couldn't go anywhere besides there. They only found out about the rest of all the horrible things going on because there was one point in which the cook was just so pissed off that she set fire to the house. That was in 1834. They found the majority of the victims there through the firemen that went in to stop everything.
Okay.
The victims that they found were in that expansive attic that I mentioned earlier, where she would keep the slaves chained up.
The torture attic.
Oh yeah, it was
like something out of a Saw movie. Worse?
Yeah, it was way worse than a Saw movie. I love the Saw movies, by the way. So, when the fire was going, obviously, she knew about it and she left. But she left all of her slaves that were up there chained just to let them burn. She did not give a shit. They said when the firemen came in, there was between 7 and 11 slaves that were chained up. They were bound by their hands and legs. They were bound by the neck. Then they found the ones that were mutilated. And trust me, I don't use the term mutilated lightly here. Some of them had like their limbs were stretched too far and twisted into weird shapes. There were a whole bunch of slaves that were buried under the flooring of the attic. So she never removed the dead slaves from the torture attic. She just left people there. So just bodies and body parts scattered all around. So all these living slaves just had to be chilling up there with rotting corpses, which I'm sure does wonders for your psyche.
That is horrible.
Oh yeah.
No one ever thought to write a help note and throw it out the window attached to a brick or anything?
I don't think that there were any windows there. I don't think they had any way to get out because they were all chained up, bound and put in cages and shit. And I mentioned the collars that some of them were trapped with. The collars had inward-facing spikes, so if they moved too much to any direction, it was just like needles going into their throats. And she would leave the slaves like hanging up there for months. Sometimes she would literally hang them or just suspend them by their like arms and
Someone
necks.
had to have been helping her. Unless she was just so physically domineering that she's able to do these things.
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty wild. She was also super abusive to her daughters. Like, she loved her daughters, but she was super abusive to him. So it's not like they would have helped her. And I don't know what her husband was up to during this time. He was doing surgeon shit, which at the time probably just meant cutting people up and throwing balloons in their lungs.
Right.
One of the women slaves that they found up there, her mouth was sewn up and it had human and animal shit in her mouth.
Human feces.
It was just a variety of shits just put in her mouth and sewn up. Some of the slaves had their intestines removed and wrapped around them like belts or scarves while they were still alive. You know, her husband was a surgeon, so she learned a lot from him.
Honey, have you seen my scalpels? Oh, no, I haven't seen them.
No
Did
idea.
you check the garage?
Did you check the attic? No,
Did you
please
leave them?
don't.
Don't check the attic.
Yeah, so she kept these people alive and threw like their intestines around them to look like high fashion.
Didn't she do like a human centipede sort of thing?
Yes, I'm about to get to that.
Okay, I'm sorry for spoiling it.
You should be. That's it. Podcast canceled. Okay, so anyway, some of the slaves had their eyes sewn shut and or gouged out entirely. A lot of them had body parts removed. Many of them had the removed body parts attached in new areas. So, you know, like, take the arms and the legs off and switch them. Those were dead, obviously. There's no way to keep those people alive.
I was going to say, are you sure that she wasn't doing it with her husband? Because you would think that if he's a surgeon, he's able to take off someone's arm and put it where the leg goes and vice versa.
He may have been helping. I don't know for sure. There's no, like, for sure thing that I was able to find, but I'm probably just stupid. But I don't know. It seemed like it was mostly her, but her husband probably had a hand in this, too. It's an expansive project for one gal.
That's a lot.
For one person.
I
didn't mean to be exclusive.
She's pretty busy. How was she able to do any of these cocktail parties when she's busy doing torture porn up in the attic?
She's a woman of many talents, to say the least. She's just got so much going on for her. She's really got her life together.
She's got her life together. She knows where her priorities are. She can take care of all of it. She's amazing.
Exactly. How does she do it?
A real Renaissance woman.
Maybe it's Maybelline. Anyway, so yeah, there were bodies that had like arms and legs switched in places. One man had his genitals removed, and there had been a, quote, crude gender reassignment surgery done to him. And I had mentioned a little earlier that she was abusive to her kids. There was one story in which she found one of her daughters trying to feed one of the slaves, and it wasn't even the attic ones, it was just like the ones in the house.
The regular guys.
Yeah, just the guys who got the good end of the deal. But anytime her daughters tried to feed any of the slaves or like be kind to them, she would beat her children. I'm sure she was rude to the slaves too, but she would just beat her children for trying to be nice to these people. Okay, so here's your human centipede thing that you wanted to
I want to hear it. I love it. I want to hear it.
Oh, I know, you will. They actually call it the human caterpillar because the person's arms and legs were removed and then fleshy stumps were sewed together in like circular patterns and sewn onto the side of them to reflect a caterpillar.
Oh my god.
So it was just one person. It wasn't like human centipeded out. But she gave him little flesh nubbies.
Yes,
yeah,
nubs.
little nubbies.
My god.
There was also the human crab, where a woman had her legs and arms broken in multiple places and reset at odd angles to resemble the shape of a crab.
That's horrible.
It's real bad, yeah. One of the women, she was wrapped up in the human intestines. Others had, and this is one that gets me. Others of them had holes drilled into their skull and wooden rods or spoons were sticking out. She would stick them in there and basically stir up their brains like a soup.
Horrible.
That one gets to me. I'm not afraid to say that. A lot of them, the bodies that they found, they had been like obviously cut open and they had their organs rearranged on the inside or just organs that were missing. It was just an absolute hellhole. I mean, it was probably the worst thing any person could imagine having to see. Like, can you imagine just finding that? You're just going to some lady's house because it's burning down and that's what you open the door to?
So what happened to her after the place burned down? I mean, did she run away? Did she have to go into exile? Did she get like a $25 fine? Slap
Let's
on the wrist?
find out.
All right, let's hear it. I'm sorry. I spoiled the story. I'm sorry.
You do. You're good at that. But whatever. We'll work on this. Okay, so after the fire, obviously word got out pretty fast about that because, you know, there was no, like, controlling the press or anything like that. So people just showed up while this house was burning down. And word got out real fast. So an angry mob of close to 4,000 people that ransacked and destroyed the house, they just tore shit up. Like the ending of Mother, minus the dead baby.
It's horrible. Thank you.
You're welcome. So LaLaurie and her family escaped the fire, and the whereabouts of Delphine LaLaurie were never discussed. So she just vanished into the night.
She got away.
She got away. Though in the 1930s, an old copper plate was discovered in the St. Louis cemetery, which claimed that she had died in Paris in 1842. But, I mean, nobody knows that for sure, and her body's still never been found. So, people have looked in Louisiana, they've looked in Paris, they've looked all around. Nobody knows exactly where her body is. Nobody knows what happened to her or her family. They just vanished after this.
It's horrible.
It really is. She was a monster. It's really hard to think that like all of these things can actually be done by one human being to another, because it does. It sounds like a Saw movie or something. It's just atrocious.
It really does sound like a Saw movie.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna end this story on a fun fact for you.
Excellent.
So the house got really messed up when that angry mob showed up, but repairs had been done and it had been passed around by owners. And in 2007, so real recent, Nicolas Cage bought the LaLaurie house.
Of course he did.
For $3.45 million. But it was foreclosed and sold again after 2009 when Nick Cage had to declare bankruptcy.
God damn it, Nicolas Cage.
God
Get your shit
damn
together.
It, Nicolas Cage. I love Nicolas Cage, though, actually. Unpopular opinion, the Ghost Rider movies are phenomenal.
No, they're horrible.
They're so much fun.
No, they're stupid.
Shut up. They're so good.
It's so stupid. What was with his fixation on the Carpenters? That made no sense. And then when he chugs that whole carafe of coffee, I mean, what the hell was that about? Made no sense.
He was a thirsty boy.
There's so much of that about that movie that makes absolutely no sense.
Okay, well, it's a fun ride. Whatever. That's not what we're here to talk about.
No, let's talk
We
about
will leave that for another episode.
Yeah, how bad of a good actor Nicolas Cage is.
How great.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Everyone loves Nicolas Cage.
No, everybody loves to
That's
hate
a known
Nicolas
fact.
Cage.
The Earth is round, Tupac is alive, and everyone loves Nicolas Cage. These are facts.
No, Nicolas Cage can... No, that's okay. All right, so my topic is a huge topic, and I'm just going to go ahead and come out and say it. We're going to talk about alien abduction.
Yes!
The problem is, not the problem, but the best part about it is that alien abduction is such a multifaceted topic that we could literally spend episode after episode after hour sharing different aspects of alien abduction. Everybody's experience is different. It just goes on and on and on. Like I said, it's just so multifaceted. There are people who have had alien contact where they saw gray aliens and, the typical thing. I woke up in the middle of the night and somebody was in my room and I flew out of my room up into the thing and then I was abducted and they probed me and they did this. And then there's other people. Exactly. And then there's other people who have met beautiful races that look like the perfect ideal of what a human being should be, and I was taken up into this plasma ship, and they revealed the secrets of the universe to me.
There's just so
and they
much
prophesied,
to
yes. And then there's the whole aspect of the alien mythos that has to do with government conspiracies, and the governments know about what's happening and they have this technology and they're not sharing this technology with us, and we have the ability to have these ships that go supersonic speeds, and we have the ability for interstellar travel. And then you just go back through all these different cultures. There's all sorts of cultures dating all the way back past ancient Egypt, where you can see it in hieroglyphs, you can see it in writings, you can see it in fresco paintings from the Renaissance period, where you see alien ships, you see extraterrestrials represented all over the place in art, in literature, in oral history, and all of that stuff. So it's been around for so long. There's so many aspects of it. The one thing I want to talk about today is one of my favorites. It's Whitley Strieber. Now, Whitley Strieber is just one guy. He's actually from San Antonio, and I forgot to mention that. We're coming to you from just right around San Antonio. We live between San Antonio and Austin. That's where we are. So this guy
is close to home.
Yeah, this guy is close to home.
He
was a celebrated author. And the reason that this one always stands out for me is because he wrote a book back in 1986-87, and it was called Communion, and the book was all about his experience. He writes about an experience right around Christmas time in 1985 when he was abducted, and it was the first time that he remembered being abducted. But from then, his life really changed, and so understandably so. So if you've never read this book, if you've never seen the cover of this book, it is really jarring. And the thing about this book is that it was a New York Times bestseller book. They promoted the hell out of this book, and if you go to our Instagram, you can see that I have a photo of Whitley Strieber posted. And then if you scroll, it's one of those two-parter photos. The second photo is a picture of the cover of the book. and it depicts what we would consider a traditional gray alien. But he spent time with the artist, getting the picture exactly right from the one alien that he had basically had a close relationship with. Every time that he got abducted, he saw this particular alien. It was like his handler.
It was more than once that he saw this same one. And
yes, exactly. It was more than once. There's just so much
horrifying.
to it. So the thing about Willie Stryber was he was already a celebrated fiction author when he was abducted in 1985. He had written at least 6 books, possibly 7 at this point, fiction books, and 2 of these books had already been turned into major Hollywood movies. One of them stars David Bowie, which is just great.
We love David Bowie.
Who doesn't love David Bowie?
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly.
So he had written all of these books, and then he comes out and he decides instead of writing fiction, he's going to write what he considers a nonfiction story. And he writes it as, and he writes it because he says in the preface of the book, this happened to me and I experienced this, and for me this is true. And I believe it is true, because why else would somebody tell this kind of story? And I mean, it's very scary. It really is scary to listen to it. And if you read the book, but all you have to do is type in, Google Communion PDF format, and you can find a copy of this book and start reading it. Within the first 10 to 15 pages, he starts to describe his experience of being abducted.
He don't waste no time at all. He just
wastes
jumps
absolutely
right into
no time
Oh
to
my
describe
gosh.
it. And to give you just a brief synopsis of what happened to him, he talks about how it was Christmas time, 1985. They'd had Christmas dinner, and he went to bed. There was a full moon outside, and he's laying in bed, second story of his house, and he thinks he hears something like a commotion downstairs, kind of like a whooshing sound. And he doesn't, he kind of sits up in bed and he thinks about it. But he had set the alarm. He had motion sensor lights outside the house. He had, vibration sensors on the windows, sensors on the doors. So in his mind, he thought, okay, well, none of these alarms are going off. It must be nothing. It's just nothing. And then he tries to go back to sleep, but then he notices that something comes into his room.
Oh, no. Not about it.
I know,
Oh,
right?
my God.
Just nope the fuck out. I would jump. It's time to jump out the window.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Just the worst thing. And, his mind couldn't quite comprehend what was coming into the room.
That's so much worse.
But it was one of those gray aliens coming into the room. And then, he's just, at some point, he is just paralyzed with terror. And then it comes across the room, puts something up to his temple, and he just blacks out. And the next thing you know, he's on a ship, and he's being, he's being handled by these aliens. And then he doesn't have any clothes on. They're all moving around him, and they're setting up this apparatus. And it's at this point where he sees another alien standing off to the side, because the grays that he saw and he describes are very small, but that there was one off to the side, his handler, who looked more what the cover of the book looks like.
And the cover of the book looks like the typical gray alien, but it's very flesh toned, and it's weird. That makes it so much weirder. Yeah. Also, real quick, I looked up the cover of the book and found that apparently Communion got turned into a movie with Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken, another great... Yes, it did. I remember watching that movie.
I don't know if it's any good or not, but I found it, and I'm interested.
It's not great, but it's not horrible. I mean, it's not like it's Nicolas Cage.
Okay, that was mean.
It could have been worse. It could have been Nicolas Cage.
Like this.
Yeah, so when Communion came out, I mean, they went on a great book tour, and he was on, he was booked on late night television talking about this experience. He was up there in the spaceship, and he remembers that his handler, the larger of the aliens, came up to him at some point and spoke to him telepathically, asking him, "What can we do to get you to stop screaming?"
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Which is just horrible. He's just terrified, and he's screaming. They did all of the regular stuff. They had him on a table, and he didn't have any clothes on. And at one point, they were about to put the thing up to his head again, some sort of instrument, and he was very scared about it. But this is where that story comes from. There's an aspect to his story that he just he puts it out there when he writes this book. They probed him anally.
Oh God!
At one point,
why is it always anal probing?
I know, and it's horrible.
What is to be gained from that?
And the reason that I bring it up is not to make fun of him. The reason that I bring it up is because he just puts it out there in this book, and he doesn't apologize for it. He doesn't try to hide it. It's become one of those anecdotes that people talk about all the time. It becomes one of those jokes that people make about being abducted by aliens. Oh, did they give you the anal probe? But it comes from experiences like this. And when I think about Willie Stryber, what gives credence to his story, to me, is the fact that he went ahead and said that. He didn't necessarily have to. I mean, he was a fiction author at the time, So if he really wanted to tell the story, he could have told the story and said, oh, I just made it up. I interviewed abductees. This didn't really happen to me.
But
and
to
he could
put
have
it out there that, like, I was abducted and I had weird alien machines put into my asshole.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
my God.
he doesn't mind saying that he was raped by the aliens.
And you were right, it does get made fun of a lot, and there's a lot of, like, anal probing jokes and stuff. But that's actually just a terrifying thought.
Right.
I hate it. I hate it so much.
But then as you learn more about the abductee experience, you realize that that's just the tip of the iceberg, that other people have experiences like that. Other people have had next generation technology inserted into themselves by the aliens, and they say, oh, I have an implant. It's in my skull. I remember them putting it in my skull. Or I remember, them putting an implant in my foot, and then I had it removed after a while, and then I got sick. And all these crazy things happen to these people over and over again. It's just horrible.
Wild.
It is. The thing about Whitley Strieber, trying to get back on track, sorry. Whitley Strieber decided at one point, after he had consulted with a physical doctor, and the physical doctor said, yes, you do have trauma. It looks like you've been raped.
Oh my God.
He had psychological trauma as well. He was experiencing PTSD, which is another one of those hallmark abductee indicators. The hypervigilance, the irritability, the exaggerated startle response. Those are all hallmarks of PTSD, and he was having those things. He had bought a shotgun. He had it in his cabin in upstate New York, which is where the experiences happened, where he'd been abducted. And he had that super elaborate security system set up at the house because he just felt like maybe something was there. And he talked about the hypervigilance too. When he talks about it, he said, I would check all the doors and the windows multiple times during the night to try to make sure that they were there because I was afraid of somebody coming into the home. And after he was abducted, another one of those hallmark abductee experiences is that he had a screen memory. And the screen memory was of an owl.
Oh my God, the owls.
I know, the owls. And we could just go on and on about the owls.
It's always
too.
the owls.
Yes, we'll do a whole episode just about how owls will fuck you up.
Good.
But he was convinced somehow, and he asked his wife about it. He said, I think there was an owl downstairs last night. And his wife was like, no, there wasn't an owl. And then he went outside and he tried to look onto the roof of the house to see if there were any owl tracks. And it was just there. And if you don't know what a screen memory is, just to give you a short synopsis, according to alien abductees, when you are abducted, sometimes they will put a screen memory into your mind to tell you, oh, well, you saw a gray and there were grays in your room, but we're going to take that memory and give you a normal memory. And the normal memory is of an owl. And so you'll have people say, oh, I saw an owl outside my window. Or I was driving down the road and I saw an owl in front of my car. And then I blacked out. And 3 hours later, I came to and I was in the driveway of my house and I don't know how I got there.
Spoiler alert, it was not an owl.
It was not an owl. It never is an owl. No, sometimes it actually is an owl. But for these guys, there was no owl. And it's just so scary. It's so scary to think about the fact that that could happen to you. At some point, Whitley Strieber, trying to make sense of what went on with his experiences, decided that he would go and have regression hypnotherapy, which is where he got most of the details of his abduction experiences. And it wasn't it was through this regression hypnotherapy that he realized that he had been abducted multiple times throughout his life.
Oh my God.
He had seen UFOs, or he had seen aliens multiple times in his life. Not only that, but his son had been abducted as well. And what's worse is that his wife had been part of the abductee experience as well. When she went through regression hypnotherapy, it turned out that she was aware of what was happening in the room when these grays would come and abduct her husband.
So she didn't get abducted, but she knew everything that was going on.
Yes,
she saw what happened.
They had basically implanted thoughts into her mind of, you're going to stay in bed, you're not going to move, you're not going to open your eyes, even though she could hear them shuffling around the room. She could hear her husband fighting.
That's absolutely horrible. It's like sleep paralysis.
It's like sleep paralysis.
Aliens.
And not only that, but they had implanted her with this idea or these thoughts that later on she would try to give her husband rational explanations for these irrational fears that he was having, or for these, like when he would say, oh, did you hear that sound last night? She would say, oh no, I didn't hear that sound.
So they just made her explain it all away.
Yes, exactly. It was her job to explain it all away, with not only her but their son as well.
Oh no.
And that's another one of those hallmark abductee moments, or one of those common denominators, is that there's a generational aspect to it, where if you were abducted, there's a chance that your father or your grandfather or your mother also was abducted or saw UFOs, and it goes on and on and on. And it's just I find the extraterrestrials and the alien abductee experiences so fascinating for so many reasons.
Yeah, because it's weird, and I mean, it's really fascinating in general, but also it's fascinating to see that, like, there are so many experiences that sound so similar and so different at the same time.
The thing that always strikes me as strange or as interesting is the idea of, I want to call it, I guess I'm going to trademark it as the multiple scientist theory. When it comes to aliens, we seem to think that it's always the same, let's say the same dozen gray aliens abducting everyone off of this one planet and performing all the same experiments on everybody and dropping them off. But that's ridiculous. That would be like, to believe that is the same as believing that Santa Claus somehow visits every house and delivers gifts for every child.
Another spoiler alert, Santa's not real.
Exactly. One night out of the year, all the way through. I mean, it's ridiculous to think we live in a vast, expanding universe with infinite space. So many civilizations could be out there. Different civilizations with different levels of technology. We could have these people, some of these people are highly advanced scientists who are probably coming to our planet as part of a grant, and they're trying to get a certain level of information, and they're authorized to experiment on X number of humans in order to define their goals. And then there's other guys who are like joyriding, and they're like, hey, let's go fuck with some humans. Let's go anal probe some guys.
I feel like that would be us as aliens.
I would hope not.
Well, not the anal probing. I just mean the joyriding.
Right.
I have no desire to anal probe aliens.
Right. Let's go Mach 9 and watch this guy's eyes fall out of his face, and then we'll put him back in his house after he's pissed himself. Because it'll be fun.
Me. Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's horrible. I mean, and humans do horrible things to each other all the time.
At Delphine
so
LaLaurie.
why would aliens from another planet be any different than us? Something else that always strikes me about the alien experience is the fact, and again, of course, the multiple scientist theory, is that here on this planet, even on our Earth, we do this to animals all the time. Here in Central Texas, we have white-tailed deer, and they are everywhere. They're such a nuisance. They're worse than stray cats in the city that we live in. There are literally white-tailed deer in every park. They're in people's front yards. They're in people's backyards. Oh yeah. You can't get rid of them. They'll be asleep in your front yard as you're bringing your trash to the street.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to like swerve around them going through your neighborhood.
Because they just don't move. They stop and look at you. They don't give a shit. You're the asshole.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm the asshole for trying to drive down the street. Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that this was your area.
Yeah. I have a friend that lives like about an hour away near Canyon Lake. And in Canyon Lake, they're all over the place.
Yes, they are.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, they are.
Especially at night, I have to go so slow passing around there.
Right. But let's consider that a scientist might come along in a car and stalk a deer into its natural habitat.
And then anal probe it.
No, let me finish. They stalk this deer, they will tranquilize this deer, and then they will go to it and perform any kind of experiment. They might give it a biopsy, they might give it a shot, they might put a tracker on it, a tracker collar, or just a tag on its ear, or something like that, and then leave it there and just leave the scene and wait for it to wake up on its own, and never explain to the deer, hey, this is what we did and this is why we did it.
And that's another thing that I like looking at, is that in your example, there would be no way of the human explaining to the deer what's going on. The deer can't comprehend it. So that's kind of the spooky thing about what aliens are doing, because we might be the deer and we have absolutely no way of comprehending.
And they have no way of communicating it to us, because a white-tailed deer does not have language like a human being does. Even though we're both mammals, we're both vertebrates, there are similarities between ourselves and deer. We both have 2 arms and 2 legs, and
I mean, we're on the same planet. We interact with these things all the time.
But they communicate through body movements and pheromones, or tail wags and ears back and forth, and we communicate with language and speech and Bluetooth and instant messaging.
So imagine how different it must be for something that's not even on the same planet.
Exactly. And that's something else that Whitley Strieber says, is that when he would try to communicate with the Greys, he remembers at one point he tried to smile at the Greys, and it just freaked them out. The way that he said it in one of his interviews was they had to slow their thinking down so much just to try to communicate with us. And again, like I said, if you look at a white-tailed deer, you say, oh no, we're nothing like a white-tailed deer. But we are. 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, a nose, those are some of the similarities. And at the same time, if you look at a gray alien, the typical gray alien, we have plenty of similarities to them. And what's to say that in 10,000 years from now, or 500,000 2,000 years from now, we haven't evolved to the point where we look like Greys.
Yeah, they could just be us from the future.
They could be us from the future. They very well could be. I don't know. There's so many unanswered questions.
I know. That's a little conspiracy theoristy.
Right. But I like the multiple scientist theory, where it's
Yeah.
like there's no, it's no wonder that there's so many different abductees and they have so many different experiences because there's so many other people out there.
Mm-hmm.
A thousand different alien races, and they could be coming to Earth for all kinds of different reasons. Some of them for, beneficial reasons, and some of them for malevolent reasons, and some of them just to get their jollies.
Or like Invader Zim, it's just pure dumb luck. They just shot out in one direction in space, and this is where they landed.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, hey, we're cruising by, and we saw that you guys, detonated an atomic bomb. Let's go fuck with those guys.
Yeah.
Because they're idiots. So that's where it is. That's Whitley Strieber. His story goes on and on. He's written more and more books about it. He's written so many more books about his experiences with what he calls the visitors, and they're out there to read and to experience. He has a podcast. He goes to UFO conferences all the time and speaks. All of this stuff is on YouTube, his own YouTube page, his own podcast, and all that stuff. And it's very easy to find all of it because it's all out there.
Nice. Was he also the one that Fire in the Sky came from?
No, that's a different guy.
Okay, I get people mixed up. There's so many.
Those guys were loggers. Those guys were loggers.
Oh, okay.
I remember watching that movie. It was a pretty good movie. It was very frightening. I've always been very frightened of the whole alien abduction experience. But one of the things that really stopped those fears was reading Communion, actually, because I realized, and then doing some research and watching some documentaries of that generational item and just trying to ask my dad, have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever been abducted? Well, no, he hasn't, because he probably would have already told me those stories. So I'm like, well, if he hasn't, then I haven't, probably.
I mean, that doesn't mean that you're not... that doesn't mean that you're safe. It's a generational thing, but it's got to start somewhere.
Oh my God.
Maybe you're damning your kids to an eternity of alien abduction.
Listen, if I wake up and if I'm on a slab completely naked, I am going to make myself known and communicate and make them pick you up because I know where you live.
That's so mean.
Yeah.
But also please do.
I'm going to say, let's go over here because this guy really wants to get probed.
This guy got some information for you.
This guy has got some information from you, and you can get it through his anus.
No, not again.
Not again.
Please don't do this to me.
All right. So we're really excited that you're listening to us.
If there's anyone listening.
If there's anyone listening, except 3 of our friends.
Please listen.
You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. Our Instagram is called Too Scared Podcast. Facebook is called Too Scared to Sleep as well.
And we're going to be setting up a YouTube channel and just posting probably our logo with the audio behind it. And we are figuring out where we're going to post this, but we will put that information out on Instagram and on Facebook and however else we can communicate where it's at to you guys.
Right. We are looking for people between Austin and San Antonio who have experiences of any kind of experience. Please, we have a Gmail account, tooscaredpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to write us a little note about your experience, we would love to talk to you. We would love to Skype with you. If you have a haunted house that is close, we would love to come and hang out with you.
Oh, yeah.
And experience
Haunted hotels,
those things.
Haunted houses. And, even if you're not in the area, you can still email us or, send us messages on Instagram or something, as long as we're not being flooded with those. But, if anybody has any sort of paranormal stories or true crime stories or anything that you want us to talk about, if you have suggestions or whatever, let us know. We want to know all of this stuff.
Yes.
And we've got a lot of ideas, but, we know that the rest of the world has really good ones too that we haven't even heard about, and we want to do as much as we can.
We would love if you could scare us.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Horrify me.
I want to be terrified by your stories. I want to know about your alien abduction experiences or your haunted house or your haunted doll.
Speaking of being horrified, you should go watch the movie Hereditary.
I'm not going to watch that movie.
Watch that movie. It's so good.
It's
It's so good.
No, and I'll tell you why. This is why this is so scary. Because I have a wife and I have kids, and I have to be the dad who gets up and investigates the noises in the house, even though I don't want to. Because all I want to do is get under the covers, because as long as I'm under the blankets, nothing can get to me. But I have to get up in the middle of the night and investigate those noises.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to put those thoughts in my head.
No, you
I'm
need
not
to put
gonna
those
watch
thoughts
that
in your
creepy
head.
ass movie.
You're gonna watch it.
No matter what you do.
I'm gonna make you watch it.
No, it's okay.
Oh yeah.
That's all right. I'll just sage my house and...
When in doubt, sage it out.
oh my god. Yes, I'll sage the shit out of the house. if I have to. So yeah, Instagram is Too Scared Podcast. Facebook is Too Scared to Sleep Podcast. Gmail is tooscaredpodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
I think that's about it.
I suppose so. I want to thank everybody who is listening for listening. I know the majority of you here in the beginning are just going to be people that we've forced to listen.
Absolutely.
But we appreciate it anyway.
So, Annabelle, anything? Any final words?
Final words, Annabelle?
Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Dylan, any final words?
No, it's off to you.
All right. Okay, so from Annabelle, our producer, and Dylan, my co-host, my name is Jake Cantu, and we hope that we have left you too scared to sleep. As shit as I am, at least I nailed that. What's with the alarm?
Oh, shit.
It did it earlier too. We have to re-record.
Yes. That's it. Scrap the whole thing.
That's it. We're done. We're doing live.
There was a few parts. The dog kept walking.
It's
Oh,
okay.
that's fine. That's fine. We'll iron these out.
Anyway,
Annabelle, edit that.
edit it. Just